Just in the last few years, human beings have fundamentally changed. So doesn't it make sense that how we market and sell to them should change too? Well, that would be the argument of today's guest. Hello and welcome to Standing Out in a Sea of Sameness. My name is Roger Courville and welcome to another episode of Thought Leader Conversations, sponsored by the crew here at Virtual Venues, where you can instantly scale your virtual and hybrid event production team with a crew that helps you focus on something other than the tech and the logistics. But we're not here to talk about us, and I'm excited to welcome to the virtual stage Shawna Suckow, CVP, CMP, CSP. We can talk about all of those. Keynote speaker, consultant, 5 times an author, including her latest, The Roaring Twenties, which was recommended by Forbes as a top marketing book of the year, has 20 plus years of specialized knowledge in consumer behavior, and notably, here's a couple fun facts, played in the World Series of Poker main event a couple years ago, and also an award-winning parallel parker. We've got to ask about that. Welcome, Shawna. Glad you're here. Tell us a little more about who you are and what you do.
I think you summed it up pretty nicely. I love spending my time helping businesses kind of gauge what's going on with their customers and their prospects so they can, to use a COVID word, they can pivot their efforts so that they meet their audience where they're at today and they don't blend in with all the noise.
Yeah, pivoting has been, at least in my world, which has included a couple startups, has often been a key word for what do we do once we're a little bit in and we figured out we weren't totally on target right up front. But I'm curious to hear your perspective, particularly post-COVID. So you've been known to argue that the whole world has shifted, particularly in the context of consumer behavior, and that the post-pandemic decade is and will continue to be, as you put it, as wild as the Roaring Twenties a century ago. So if we can't keep doing what we've always been doing, what's the first and foremost place that you start when you work with an organization, and where are they missing the mark?
Well, sometimes we have to start with convincing. Like some people are on board, but not everybody's on board with change, which is the case with any type of change. I mean, that's pretty universal. So we have to do a little bit of educating about how humanity has changed. And then we go into, well, who are your current customers? What do you want your future customer base to look like? So that involves different generations. It can involve different geography. Who are the prospects that they want to target? And I look at what they're doing now and see where those gaps are between what they're doing now and what their audience wishes that they were doing, so that the audience would actually pay attention.
I love that you get to this kind of foundational level of even, and this is a big statement, arguing that humanity has changed. Tell me a little more. What are some of the big trends that you're seeing?
I think that we are in the biggest period of change since the 1920s. There are a lot of things that mirror that decade that we're going through. There's economic upheaval, the pandemic, war, all sorts of things. But what we have that they didn't have was technology. And that is accelerating everything and making everything so much bigger. And it's a huge period of change, and nobody is unaffected. So that naturally changes who we are as human beings, which means it changes how we buy, which therefore means that organizations have to change how they sell and market. And one of the biggest things that I talk about is you can't just have a singular message on repeat anymore. That doesn't work because our attention spans, which I know you talk about too, our attention spans are shorter, not only shorter, but they're different. And so we talk about how you can share your message, but in a more appealing way. So you stand out from the noise, which is only getting bigger and bigger because of technology and AI.
Yeah, in fact, I'm so glad we had a chance to talk because I remember reading Paco Underhill in the 1980s about, talking about the nature of retail psychology, et cetera. But but in the 1970s, it was, the person who wrote Future Shock. Um,
Oh, oh, uh, if only there were a way to know.
oh, right. Well, so anyway, brain fart. I've used his example in 100 presentations I've given, but the point. He was the editor of Forbes at the time, right? And part of his point was that in the future, that the rate and scale of change would be so significant that we would experience like culture shock, future shock, like the same way that you have when you go to some different culture, and the culture and the food and the customs are very different, in a psychologically diseasing sort of way. He was arguing for that with being the consequence of the rate and scale of change in the future. And by golly, I think we're there.
I mean, right? What a amazing guy that Alvin Toffler was.
Right.
Uh,
Tough.
See, it's because I had this,
Yeah, right.
which in the 1970s we would just stay frustrated. Well, we wouldn't be podcasting for another thing, but um, I mean, he was so vanguard in his approach and his thinking for the time. Even for 10 years ago, people, you know, you and I, we've been at this a while, and 10 years ago, people were they were very slow to accept the level of change that we were under then, and it has multiplied now. So I think people are getting on board that they have to adapt, and it's so much larger in scope than it's ever been in our lifetimes.
So broadly speaking, what are what are old strategies that you see people continuing to attempt to apply in this changed world that maybe aren't as effective as they used to be?
That message on repeat. It used to be that it would take, I think the old adage was it would take 9 touches before your message stuck. Today, you don't get 9 opportunities. You are annoying and tuning out your prospects before you even get to opportunity number 3. So you have to realize that you only have 1 or 2 chances to get their attention. But then after that, you can give different messaging to help build that trust that you need. Trust is the critical. I say trust is the new features and benefits. It used to be that you would lead with your features and benefits. You can't really do that anymore because you haven't even established trust. People don't care
Right.
until A, they're ready, and B, they trust you. So
As you take that and work with clients to then bring that down to some tactical level, is there a place that you begin with them saying, hey, so that may change up how we think about copywriting or social media, or tell me a little more. How do you approach that?
So we're in the age of customization. There's no one size fits all approach to practically anything today. Um, and and so we have to appeal to a lot of different personalities, a lot of different dynamics, a lot of different we have to appeal to different genders, different ages, but that one size approach doesn't fit or work anymore. So what I talk about is what I call a marketing mosaic, which also there's a sales mosaic, but that's different for this conversation. So marketing mosaic is if you think of a mosaic piece of art, it's comprised of a bunch of little tiles.
Mm.
Well, each one of those tiles in your marketing mosaic is a different micro story or a micro message that you tell. Now, companies may think, well, I only get 1 or 2 chances to break through. I better cram it all into this one spot, this one blog, this one video, this one post, this one whatever. No, 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 no. You're just trying to pique their interest first to stop the scroll. And then once you've gotten their attention, you can start to appeal to them and build trust through micro stories. And micro stories, um, there's no longer a need for a committee around a table or an ad agency. I shouldn't say no ad agencies, but there's no need day to day for an ad agency to sit around and think of $1 million idea as much as what are your micro ideas, and you add to it all the time. Your marketing mosaic is never done because you're never done as a company. You're never done creating products. You're never done getting customers. You're never done hiring. And so your mosaic is all of those micro stories that you can tell, not just about your product and not just pitching all the time, but humanizing the actual people who work there and what you do and the reason you do it so that you start to build trust. But the first thing, of course, is always standing out. So it's piquing that interest first.
I love how you connected the words microstory and stop the scroll. So for me, I just passed 25 years in the virtual events business, right? Wrote a few books on webinars and blah, blah, blah. That and, that and a few bucks. Used to buy a latte, but it won't anymore. But the challenge, I spent a lot of time studying attention and the nature of persuasion and copywriting in a very specific context, right? Because predominantly it's email marketing and if not some social marketing that is part of how people promote virtual events. But over the years, one of the things that I've seen with regard to the statistics is that more and more the headline or the title of the event needed to carry pretty much all of the freight. Meaning there's the title of the event, but then, you expect there's going to be a registration page that says, hey, come to this event. Here's the problem. Here's the potential solution. Come to this event and you will learn these 5 bullet points. And yet frequently we don't get somebody to read that far. So whether that's the subject line in your email or a tweet or now, a post on X or LinkedIn, the title of the event increasingly needed to carry the freight with regard to stopping the scroll. And I love you use those words.
So today, what I'm seeing, I've done some A/B testing with some different, with 2 different email campaigns, 2 different email drip campaigns sent to my list of people who had not responded to anything in years. So a dead list. And on the one hand, I wrote a very vague subject line and a very direct 1 paragraph, not too much detail email. And on the other hand, I wrote a detailed subject line and I used a lengthier email body with a lot of humor. And sadly, the humor did not win because I love to get people's attention with humor in my emails. And I feel like that makes me stand out. But I can't stand out if they're swiping away before I even get a chance to say what I want to say. So what I'm recommending now, and this is changing every 6 months, if that, based on our audience and how accelerated their change is. But what I'm recommending right now is vague subject line that maybe speaks to their need. Because if they don't recognize let's say it's an event, if they don't recognize the name of the event and the purpose is not in the name of the event, it could just be like National ABC Convention. It's an immediate swipe. They don't have time and they don't know how it's relevant. So something that's vague, like, are you coming? Or, something that speaks to whatever challenge they have that this conference is going to solve, that is vague, that at least gets them to stop the scroll, not delete, and open. And then you can speak to their problem because they don't care about your conference till they care about how relevant it is to them and get all those details in, but it still has to be really brief. That's what I'm learning is going on right now. So sadly, less humor.
Well, you know what? That is a wisdom nugget right there. Maybe we'll even extract that out in the future for our, to share. Because I can promise you that the vast majority, 99 point something percent of typical webinar or virtual event marketers are not doing that kind of thing. We're all familiar with it, right? When we see it show up in our inbox, but I can promise you corporate B2B marketers are not are generally not doing something like using a vague headline like, are you coming?
Yeah, they're trying to maximize, and I get it because this used to work not that long ago, recently. They're trying to maximize the viewer's time, respect their time, which is good. It's a good intention and it used to work, but the shift has happened away from that already. And now it's piqued their interest first, which means we have to either appeal to their need, not say, here's what we're selling, right off the bat, or at least get them to open the email through something vague. Um, One of the things, like when I'm doing B2B prospecting on big ticket accounts, often the subject line for me is coffee next week. I mean, who's going to not open that? They're like, do I know this person? Do we have a coffee appointment? And that gets opened, widely opened for me. That's a pretty unique scenario for me. Anybody's welcome to use that. Although it is going to take more than, as you said, a couple bucks to get a latte these days. But yeah, and then in the body of that, I now am very brief and I ask a couple quick questions and then I offer to hop on a Zoom for virtual coffee.
Interesting.
And
And I
that's
love
what's
the
working
creativity.
now.
I've worked with clients, and every once in a while you'll bump into somebody that has that sense of humor or is willing to try something a little different. One of my favorites was working with a client to make their reminder emails with regard to their webinars, right? Because unlike, say, a white paper or other direct response kinds of mechanisms, a webinar has a life cycle. Right, there's registration, then attending, then post-event follow-up, and there's all kinds of opportunities to connect, communicate, and if not, gather data along the way. So we altered the reminder email subject lines of their from their system to say, "Did you make a unicorn cry?" And if you open it up, it was like, research shows that every time someone registers for but doesn't attend a webinar, a unicorn somewhere in the universe breaks into tears. And you know,
Roger, that's brilliant.
well, but I mean, what's speaking of sameness, right? That's one of your key messages is you got to figure out a way to bust through the noise. And what is otherwise a webinar reminder going to do? It's going to say, reminder, webinar tomorrow at, and then and sadly, if you open it, it doesn't even remind you of the benefit of that you were expecting, meaning, why was I going to show up to this to begin with?
Right.
I registered 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. And the humor there is totally, totally appropriate and great idea because they've already discovered you. They've already built trust enough to register for the thing. So those two challenges, those two hurdles are behind you. And now it's just getting them to show up. And I love that tactic. Something similar to that got me to join the gym that I still belong to. It was if you don't show up, then they had like a pet goldfish mascot, then Goldie doesn't get an extra treat tonight. And I was like, the horror. And how awesome is that a gym has a mascot that's a goldfish?
Right.
And it wasn't even Gold's Gym.
That's awesome.
Opportunities lost.
So if I know or understand your material well, and to be fair, I haven't read all of your books, but you talk about the need to like reconnect in a world where connection is evolving. And I may be taking a little bit of license with how you've put it in the past, but what practical steps can B2B companies take to build that trust and connection through maybe particularly virtual or digital channels?
This is a hard one, the larger the company, but the larger companies, I would say, can benefit the most from this tip I'm about to drop. And that is, they're not going to like this, getting rid of the models, getting rid of the perfection. Humor is still great. We love humor. We love anything that evokes emotion is going to make you more memorable. And I love that. But it can't always be perfect people in a perfect world, perfectly, curated to have different ages and all and different genders and different cultures and all that. And we sniff that out now and we're like, they're trying to be everything to everyone. They're nothing special to anybody. And so again, the micro story concept, but use real people telling your story. Use real employees, use real customers, real vendors, real issues that you overcame, rather than saying we're the best, we're the best, we're the best. Now it's about your customers or your employees reading, your employee reading a review going, oh my gosh, they said this about me, or your customer saying, I I couldn't find anybody to help me with this. and then I found so and so, and it has to be real. It can't be, paid actor. We just don't trust that anymore. And so, more humanizing, which we've been on this humanization and authenticity train now for 10 years, but now it's even more critical because everybody has what I call the BSO meter. Hope that's okay to say. But we're fine tuned now, all of us, since the pandemic, to sniff out anything that even smacks of a sales pitch or not being authentic, um, just made perfect to sell us your stuff. And we just don't trust it anymore.
So talk to me a little bit about your book, your latest book, The Roaring Twenties. What are a few of the parallels that you saw between the Roaring Twenties of the 1920s and what you've seen go on in the world here recently?
So much. Just the fact that there voting was a huge deal as it is in our country right now. There was divisiveness because in 1918, women were fighting for the right to vote, and not everybody agreed with that. There was war. We were looking at the Great World War, World War One, and we had economic uncertainty. It was a crazy decade until it wasn't, and I hope that doesn't repeat itself. Um, and so much was going on. A lot of things were changing and coming about. If you think of the dawn of electricity and cars and everything, it was just this crazy era that people lived through, and we have the privilege of living through this amazing renaissance of that hasn't happened in the next 100 years, and we can't even tell how amazing it is because we're in the middle of it. So I think in 10 years we're going to look back on it and go, wow, we were there. It's like you and I were old enough to remember when email first happened and the internet and the first cell phones and all that. We're at the dawn of AI. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's something. And it's the Wild West right now. We don't even know, 5, 10 years from now what's going to happen, but we get to live through it. We get to experience it, which I think is a privilege.
I think that's an astute observation. Mostly because my own bias would be, I totally agree. I've often actually argued in presentations that we are already evolving out of the information age and into the next thing. And I'll kind of sometimes go into that more deeply and lay out here is the nature of value creation by epoch, right? Industrial age, information age. Now, what's next, and how we connect, how we communicate, how we learn, how we create value, um, is radically changing. And you're right. I mean, I'm an old Gen Xer, and I still remember what it was like to buy a 1200 baud modem and log into the local television station and think, oh, I just got the weather report over a modem.
Right? It's crazy. Not that but you couldn't talk on the phone at the same time,
Right?
because it would, make everything fail. But do you have a name yet for the next age? Have
Well,
you figured out what you call it?
I do, such that I even went out and got the URL and whatever. So ultimately, at that, I would boil it down to the nature of capital. And in the industrial age, it was bigger, better, faster, smaller, cheaper labor.
Hmm.
In the information age, it became bigger, better, faster, smaller, cheaper information or knowledge work. But what happens when information and knowledge and the number of channels through which we connect and communicate and or gather that is functionally infinite, so that we can't possibly absorb it all or get to it all? I would argue that then relationship is the oldest new killer app, and therefore it is the age of connection or something like that.
I love that. And how true is that? Information is ubiquitous. What's rare is true human connection, the relationship, so much so that there's a loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
So absolutely, well done. Kudos to you. That is 1,000%. I think where we're at as well.
Well, and you mentioned the loneliness epidemic. That actually relates to some of my doctoral work. So you wouldn't know this, but I kind of paused my professional speaking time and um, went back to grad school, and I'm
In
now
Denver.
say what?
In Denver.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in Seattle, but yeah, I'm going to Denver Seminary. So, but
Mhm.
but that problem of, and we all know it at one level, right? COVID did crazy things to companies and to how our children are educated and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, coming back to you and I talking to B2B marketers, what is both the cultural observation, but what is the opportunity? Right. And to your point, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I can accurately reflect back some of the things that you've talked about, right? Being authentic, being able to say, how do we tell a micro story in a way that, begins to plant a seed of trust, and on and on and on. It's not that it's not doable, but it's sure not the way it was 5 or 10 years ago. Now the question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah, yeah. And that is the reason why these micro influencers have just taken off because people trust them now more than Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian still has her bazillion followers, but I think the influence now is the every person who is on TikTok just talking about their experience with the product, and that goes viral because people are hungry for somebody who's real and relatable and approachable. And in the span of a minute long TikTok, everything you need to know sometimes about the product. And so,
Seth Godin was talking about this a long time ago, right? And he was talking about the shifting or evolving marketing landscape. And I'd be curious, particularly since a lot of your clients are corporate, and whether you're speaking to an audience or consulting with an exec team or something like that. If we observe those trends, like here's what's going on with micro influencers on TikTok, how do we take the principles there and bring them back into the corporate world? What are you advising clients on when it comes to saying, how do we be real and authentic and do something differently that reflects this changing world and changing humanity?
they might not like this much, but that marketing mosaic that I was talking about, it's democratizing your message, but also democratizing your budget.
Mm,
So it's not just, okay, we're going to do a $5 million campaign, and it's going to be this message, and it's going to go out on these channels in this way for this long. Now it's, okay, take that same 5 million and split it up 100 ways. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but once you get it established, it's a repeatable process. So it's democratizing your budget now. It's not all your eggs in one basket. If there's one tip that I can leave people with is that does not work anymore. That's easier. And I just had the honor of seeing Seth Godin at a conference, and he said something. I'm paraphrasing, but the more established your company is, the more it looks for savings and efficiency. And those two things are the death of innovation.
mm,
So these big companies that have been around for a while, if they're looking for marketing to be easy, they're not innovating and they're vulnerable to small and mid-sized companies who understand this and are going after it.
right.
So the key now is to realize that everything has changed. The mosaic approach is kind of where we're at. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect and one message for a year. It can be, what's working at that time through an influencer for that day or that week, because that stuff stays on TikTok or other channels forever and people will go in search of it.
So as we kind of bring the plane in here toward the the runway, share with me a little bit about what are clients experiencing when they come to you and they sense that there's something within what you've said resonates with them, and they pick up the phone or send an email and reach out to you and say, "Hey, I think we need some help." What are they experiencing? Maybe those felt pains, but also those latent pains that they may not necessarily even be able to put into words.
Well, I'm used to that because um, where we're at with consumer behavior is really hard to stay on top of and put into words. So there is a lot of confusion and frustration, and um, so coming with an open mind is key, and a willingness to embrace change, because it's only going to come harder and faster, the level of change that we're seeing now. And so being able to accept that as, change is the new black, let's say. Um, and then I do a 35-point marketing assessment to kind of get a pulse on where they're at now, and then share that with them. And it becomes evident where their gaps currently are. And then it also becomes evident what they're doing really, really well. And most companies have both. It's not that everything's failing. Some things are still working really well for them. And I never go in and say, you need to change everything. It's if it's working well for you, why mess with that until you realize it's not working well for you anymore? But especially the larger the company, the numbers. And if you're seeing a downturn, and you can't blame it on anything else because other things aren't having the same downturn, other messaging, other efforts, other departments, you kind of have to accept that it's probably the way, the means, the delivery method, or the content itself. And so we establish where the gaps are, and then we figure out what their industry is going through, how they are unique, and what prospects they want, and we bridge that.
Just out of curiosity, when someone has an organization has some place that's not working well for them, is it generally because they tried something and it didn't work, or it's that they're still doing something that they used to do, but the world has shifted out from under them?
It's usually the second one. And this is the good thing about democratizing your budget. If one thing doesn't work, all your eggs aren't in that basket.
Right.
You still have 99 other things that 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 are still out there and in play. And the other part of that is the one thing doesn't have to be all things to all people. The one thing can appeal to, like, if you want to appeal to older married couples, great, that's one micro story. If you want to appeal to Gen Z, that's another micro story. So if one thing isn't working right, you don't just trash the whole campaign. You pay attention and you see what you can glean from that, and how that will influence future micro stories, not major campaigns. And I think I got off track a little bit. Did I even answer your question?
Yeah,
I got on my
you did, and
my
that's
little
actually
soapbox.
honestly is part of what I love about at least the way I have liberty to have these conversations is, one, it's a conversation, and two, it's just a keeping it real. It's like you and I having a cup of coffee, and somebody can listen in if they want to, as we talk about something that's related to the marketers and marketing and the nature of how we do this.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I remember touching nose now. I remember it is that they're doing things the same old way, is what you said. And that is the death of marketing, because marketing, if you think about it, marketing should be innovative. It should be addressing what's next. So you're always one step ahead of where your customers are headed. And so if it's not making you a little uncomfortable, you're probably not doing it right. So it's that repetitive over and over again. And what I hate to see is when those results start to decline, people blame themselves, their department. We're not working hard enough. We didn't do it right. We didn't, but really, it's not about working harder. It's about, well, maybe the messaging just needs to change, or you need to focus on a different platform, different delivery, different length, different. So it's kind of curating what is the perfect fit for that time. And it's not going to probably be the same in 6 months. So again, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, that is a killer point. Because, I've been part of corporate marketing teams, from startup to Microsoft, and you spend all this effort figuring out who your targets are, and here's our personas, and we go give them demographics and psychographics, and we kind of try to paint and go, okay, now here are the 5 targets that we're going to talk to, and here are our key messages for. And yet at the same time, even as you were saying that, I remembered some of my earliest experience with marketing was back in the 90s, and I was working for a client that used predominantly direct mail, selling high-end financial research. And, after some testing, they'd go to market with a particular direct mail piece, right? You've done our A/B tests or tested our combinations. Of course, this is physical mail as opposed to digital at the time. But even then, the prevailing wisdom was, great, you get a hit on some particular combination of copy and creative, and now just keep hitting it, right? Just keep going to market with that same thing until it stops pulling. And then we figure we've got to go back to the drawing board with regard to testing new copy, new creative, et cetera. And I'm just like, well, if we knew that in the 90s, sending out direct mail pieces, if it's let your winners run, cut your losers fast. And if we did that in the 90s with direct mail, how much more opportunity do we actually have to do that now?
Right. Well,
a lot less expensive to go test an idea.
Exactly. Sorry to interrupt. I just
No.
got so excited about direct mail because direct mail is kind of back. If done well, it can be extremely effective because there's so much less of it these days. But your point about demographics and psychographics and all the data, with any data, it is immediately outdated as soon as you get it because it's looking back. So it can absolutely inform and should inform your efforts today, but there's also some nuance that has to be gleaned from where you see the future trends going and how somebody, an expert, can interpret those in the now based on where you were, but also based on where we expect the market to be going. And that's the $1 million question right now. So data is important, but it is aging the minute you get it.
Shawna, tell us how best to get in touch with you should someone here listening want to connect.
I would love for them to visit my website. My phone and email are clearly at the top of my website. They can reach out anytime. I would love to have a connection with anybody who wants to chat about this more, or they can take my free 12-point marketing self-assessment if they want to do that on my website as well.
So just in case you are listening but not watching, Shawna, Shawna, Suckow, SUCKOW.com, and you can get that 12-point self-assessment and or just pick up the phone and give Shawna a call. Shawna, thank you so much. One final question. Are there any questions I should have asked you that I haven't?
You did not ask me about my parallel parking award.
You're right. Oh, let's bring it. Parallel park. You're right. I am now utterly a failure as an interviewer.
I got the award for the best female parallel parker under 20 in my household back in the day.
Presumably, since you also mentioned that you were Gen X, presumably before AI could park your car for you.
Yes, I have that was in all fun, but I still am a master parallel parker. I don't care where it is, what side of the street, if it's on a hill, whatever. I don't use a camera. I don't use AI. I'm like, whoo, 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 and done.
That's awesome. Shawna, thank you so much for spending a little time with us and dropping a few wisdom nuggets on us. Again, ShawnaSuckow.com to call and get your 12-point assessment. Look her up on Amazon too. You can find her books there. And thank you again to our host and sponsor today, Virtual Venues, who who will help you manage your webinars or virtual hybrid event production if that's something that needs to make sense. We'll see you on the next episode of Thought Leader Conversations.